Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to have people join us. I see that folks are starting to enter the Zoom, and we're ready to get started. My name is Tom Evers. I'm the executive director of the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, and we're thrilled to have sort of an encore conversation tonight from one of our Next Generation of Park lecture series. Dudley Edmondson and Monica Bryand are here joining us again. We did a conversation as part of the Next Generation Park series a couple of weeks ago on Winter Birding 101. And huge turnout. Many of you were with us, and we had a lot of follow-up with questions. And so we thought we'd just take another hour to have additional conversation and questions. So thank you for all who are joining us. We'll just spend the next hour really delving into the world of birds, birding, and Minnesota. Before we jump in, I just want to say a couple quick words. Thank you to our sponsors, Minnesota Public Radio, who sponsor the Next Generation Park Lecture Series. They help host these events. They help promote these events, and they really help spread the word. So thank you to them. This Next Generation Park Lecture events is a recurring series of free speakers. We really appreciate how people have adapted to join us online. And I will say that we miss seeing all of you in person, and we hope that in the future we're able to do this again, because it's great to have the conversations with each of you afterwards. But thank you for joining us. So really tonight's going to be pretty informal. We're gonna you'll see on your screen down below there's a questions. You can pose questions. We'll then I'll be asking them of Monica and Dudley. And let me if we can have Monica and Dudley hop on here. I'll do a quick introduction of them for folks to reacquaint themselves. Hello, the both of you.
Hello.
And Dudley is actually joining us from Ely, which is great, Ely, Minnesota. So thank you for chiming in, and Monica, I think, is here in the Twin Cities with us. Brief introductions of the two of you for folks who don't know. Dudley Edmondson is an author. He's a public speaker. He's a filmmaker. He has a passion about nature and getting people of color outdoors. He speaks regularly on his books and his career as a wildlife photographer. And his clients include educational institutions, state and federal agencies, and environmental nonprofits. His photography career spans nearly 3 decades, and his work has been featured in galleries and in nearly 100 publications around the world, including state-specific flora and fauna guides with the author Stan Tequila, and a book called Bird, the Definitive Visual Guide. And you can see more on his work on Instagram. Welcome, Dudley. Thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Monica Bryand started out her career as an accountant, but was fortunate to spend over 25 years in the philanthropic community, including 16 years at the Headwater Foundation for Justice, which is a phenomenal organization. So thank you for that work. In 2015, Monica decided to make a major career change, and has taken on many consulting opportunities and followed her passion for birding photography, working on special projects with Audubon, Minnesota. She's currently the co-executive director of Voices for Racial Justice, as well as leading and supporting the Urban Bird Collective. Monica believes in community service and served on many boards and communities for over 25 years. Currently, you're volunteering with the local district council, West Side Community Council, Audubon St. Paul's Conservation Committee, and earlier we were talking about she serves on the board for Hawk Ridge, which is a phenomenal organization. Monica is a Latina that believes that it is critical to work across issues that affect us all and to work for systems change at the same time. Monica's passion include the environmental, women's, people of color, and LGBT issues. And she feels extremely fortunate to pursue her passions for both people and the birds. And I feel very fortunate and really appreciative to have the both of you return with us. So thank you both for making the time. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks.
So the way we are going to lay this out, folks, is, we, as the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, we We support the whole system, Minneapolis parks. We know that parks transform human lives, and we help align community vision with philanthropic investment. And one of the things that makes our parks just fantastic is that they engage people at all sorts of different levels. Birding is one of those things that you can come at any way and really find an entry point. And we want to keep making opportunities for people to do that. So if you're in Minneapolis, you do not have to go far to really experience birding. I'm going to start with just a question for both of you. I just read your introductions, but I would really love to each of you take a few moments and share with folks a little bit about it and how you yourself, what brought you into birding? How did you really start this path?
Go ahead, Monica.
All right. So I've always been sort of, love the outdoors, been an environmentalist, but some friends of mine took me out birding about 20 years ago, and I did not know what we had right here. I was shocked to see, for the first time to see a cedar waxwing. And, of course they were there every year, but to actually see it through my binoculars and then just to see all the different birds. And I was just hooked. From there, I'm a bird photographer, but what the photography helped me to do was to actually, to even, really narrow down and be able to really explore the bird in so many different ways, capture it and take it home and really just explore the birds. So photography have been my binoculars. I always consider myself a birder first and a photographer second. So, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it probably goes back to junior high school. I think I did a book report on, the Philippine eagle or monkey eating eagle, I think in 8th grade or something like that, which was too long ago to say, but that kind of really got me interested in birds. And then I had a high school art teacher who was a well-known, nationally known birder, and he formed a bird club for some of the students in his art class. And so we went birding in Texas and in and around Central Ohio, where I'm originally from. And birds just really opened the door to really everything that's in the out of doors. I mean, you like birds, and then you start learning about their habitat and what trees and things that they nest in and the things that they eat. And, so to me, birds are kind of a gateway sort of animal, so to speak, to nature, because then, you get into plants and you get into, pollinators and things like that. And so, but yeah, I've been watching birds for 4 decades and never really get tired of seeing them or talking about them, really.
Awesome. Dudley, was there a bird that one of your first birds that you're like, wow, that you remember seeing that kind of struck you as remarkable?
Yeah, probably the peregrine falcon is definitely a bird, just because it's so crazy fast and just seems to know what it's doing all the time, whether it's going 30 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, it's totally in control. And it's just something about, the way they hunt ducks and shorebirds and things like that with their precision that I just thought was really cool. So definitely peregrine.
How about you, Monica? Was there one that struck you early? You mentioned cedar waxwing.
Yeah, it was the cedar waxwing, and then again, just every bird. I mean, just like, oh my God, green heron. That was all in the first day. And to see those, it was just crazy.
Great. Well, I know one of the questions I see we're getting some. So I encourage folks as you're watching this, please send us your questions. One question that I wanted to start with, because I know it was sort of a holdover from the last one, but locally here we have a pretty significant rookery, the heron rookery. I don't know how familiar either of you are with heron rookery on the Mississippi, but if you're experienced with that one specifically, if you can share a little bit about what people might see if they go to that site and its significance and how rare or not rare this is, and just a little bit about the site and the great blue herons that inhabit the rookery.
So I like to do a lot in my kayak. So I do a lot of birding in my kayak, and I have gone by the heron rookery there. But I actually explore a lot. I go down to Pig's Eye, where there's another heron rookery, heron, egrets, eagles, everything. And so I think it's probably pretty similar. I think that the heron rookery up the Upper Harbor, where you are, you get to see more of the nesting, and you get to see a lot of the herons. Down in Pig's Eye, it's deeper into the sort of, you can't go on the island, and so you don't actually see the nests. But I always I describe it as a egret, a great egret and heron, great blue heron highway. It's just like they just fly back and forth, and it's one of my favorite places to take people kayaking. So
that's great. All right, we're getting some questions in here. One of them is, I know Minnesota has lots of warblers in the spring and summer. What exactly makes a warbler a warbler?
Dudley.
I mean, the technical side of it, I don't really know. If there's, but I know some of it has to do with this, the type of, in that particular case with that bird, it eats a lot of insects. And that's the reason why it comes to northern Minnesota. As every Minnesotan knows, we have a significant number of mosquitoes. And so these are what warblers are considered neotropical migrants, meaning that they spend their winters in Central America and they migrate to the United States, and particularly in the northern part of the United States for breeding. And so we end up with things like Canada warblers and Cape Mays and all kinds of species. Connecticut and mourning warbler are two species that people really enjoy seeing, but all of those birds are, they're nesting here primarily because of the amount of food that's available in the form of insects, and particularly mosquitoes. If I'm not mistaken, there's also something to do with the fact that they are quite, vocal songsters. I mean, all birds sing, but warblers are really known for their ability to sing, specific songs that attract mates. And so I don't know if that's a good enough answer, but those are the things that I know about warblers, as being migrants that nest, we share them with Central America, basically, and the fact that they sing. So hopefully that's a good enough answer for you.
I just love the fact that how wide of a range we share, and the way you say we share it with Central America is just a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Is it harmful to feed birds bread?
Monica? Well, I wouldn't recommend that you feed them bread. They, try to get, I always even think, try to make sure that the food that you do buy them is fresh and, doesn't have, is pesticide free. And so, I wouldn't recommend bread.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Bread certainly attracts birds such as gulls and pigeons and crows, but it's really not, food that you should feed them. I mean, just considering what, the bird would normally eat, in its habitat, and then also just food that is labeled specifically for birds, such as, sunflower seeds, black oil striped sunflower seeds, safflower seeds, millet, all of those kinds of things are things that are considered to be safe for birds to eat versus a loaf of Wonder Bread that has all kinds of bleached flour in it and who knows what other chemicals are in it. So I would not recommend feeding birds bread.
Wait, why are we eating bread?
Yeah,
Right, maybe.
exactly.
Should we feed
Exactly.
ourselves bread?
Yeah, I eat homemade bread, and but I do not eat store-bought bread.
Maria's wondering, what is your preferred tech to learn bird songs? Oh yeah, I have difficulty learning them and have tried a couple of tech, visual via graphs, mnemonic, listening in the field many times. Any suggestions on how, what you've used to learn bird songs?
Well, since I've been birding for over 20 years, this is before, iPhones and all of those things. And, I had a little, little machine, and I had a card, and I put it in, and I would, practice my bird calls. But now what I do, because every spring I'm like, I need to refresh. I need to get ready for what's out there. And so, especially if I'm going to a place and I know which warblers I might be able to see in certain places, I'll practice those warbler calls. But I have an app. I do iBird Pro on my phone. There's lots of apps. Dudley and I talked about some apps that you can have on your phone. And I really just practice, the calls on there before I go out.
Yeah, and I'd say the sooner you can start in terms of in your life, listening to bird calls, because like Monica, I would always listen to bird. I would use CDs and cassettes back in the old days, and I would actually, as I was driving to a location to go birding, I would have them loaded in the car stereo and would listen. But like Monica said, at the beginning of each season, it's a good idea to revisit bird songs, whatever format you have, whether it's a bird app or a CD or a cassette or something, and just familiarize yourself with the species that are commonly found in the area where you live in the state.
Excellent. I do either of you have a bird call that you do that you would care to share?
No bird calls here.
DDD.
Yeah,
No,
my wife does a really good raven. She's really good at ravens. Yeah, but
Do you want me to give him an example?
no.
We're putting her on the spot.
Yeah.
So, there's a couple of things about seasonal questions. What kinds of birds stay in Minnesota during the coldest winter? And then one is, well, let's start there. What kind of birds do stay in Minnesota for the coldest winter?
So Dudley, I'll start, and then you can.
Yeah.
So woodpeckers are the ones, most woodpeckers stay, even the northern flickers, even though a lot of them migrate, some stay. But, you have your pileatids, downies, harries. In Minnesota, we have blackback and three-toed woodpeckers, which are more up north. And those are pretty more rare. And then you have your chickadees, nuthatches, cardinals. And, we were even talking before we started this, robins are now staying more and more. Some migrate, some don't. Cedar waxwings, which some migrate, some stay. You can find some cedar waxwings that are here in the cities. Blue jays stay, and then we're very in Minnesota, we get the dark-eyed juncos, which will come and visit us in the winter. So, and then the owls, most of the owls will stay.
Yeah, and a lot of birds come to Minnesota for winter. So, there are birds who stay here, and then there are birds who come down from further north, like Monica said, the owls, and even eagles. There's quite a few eagles that will overwinter in Minnesota as well. Birds of prey in general, rough-legged hawks, things like that. So
that's a good point. We often think of birds migrating up to Minnesota, and we actually are the southern edge of some bird migrations.
Yep.
Which is, hardy creatures. So similarly, right now, what are, we started a couple weeks ago, we did winter birding 101 and looking at, and it was like negative whatever outside. And now it's, 40 degrees plus here. What birds are you expecting to see here in the Twin Cities? What can folks see if they went outside right about now that you're going to start seeing in the next, let's say in the next month? What should folks start to see return here?
Yeah, the first, you're going to start seeing some of the ducks, some of the open water. The ducks are going to start migrating back. You'll see some sparrows or some, and then there's waves. So certain sparrows are going to come earlier than other sparrows. We talked about the warblers. Those are going to come, again, you have your different waves. Your palm warblers and butterbutts are going to come sooner than some of the other ones. But that'll be, late April, early May. Yeah, Dudley, what would you add?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to point out that, that things come in waves. And like you said, sparrows, certainly come in waves. And waterfowl certainly is probably one of the earliest waves of birds. And there was a time when crows actually would move further south, but now they're overwintering here in northern Minnesota. But yeah, I mean, it's like you'll get this bird called American tree sparrow, which is usually one of the first species of sparrows I see other than juncos, that, their numbers increase. Juncos are here through most of the winter, but their numbers sort of increase as, you get into, probably mid to late March or something like that. And then tree sparrows show up, white throat, white crown sparrows. I mean, there's so many different kinds of just sparrows alone, which sometimes can be overwhelming for people to realize that, there's maybe, 10 species of sparrows perhaps in Minnesota, maybe more. I haven't really thought about it, but if you listed them off, I'm sure
There's
you'd
more,
end up in the double digits
Yeah.
of species that you could see. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And I think the other thing is Hawk Ridge, we've always been well known for the fall migration. And it wasn't until a few years ago that we actually got some grant money to start monitoring the spring migration. So of course there's a spring and a fall migration. And the spring count starts March 1st. So the raptors are going to start coming back up at Hawk Ridge.
That's cool. I didn't know that they're doing a spring count. That's cool.
Yep.
I'll
Yep.
be on the lookout.
This is the third year. Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody had chimed in when you're talking about the owls that were flying down. What type of owl would we see here that is actually a northern, that is coming, down to be flying south for Minnesota rather than north?
Yeah, I'd say there's 3, let's see, snowy, great gray, boreal, northern hawk owl, 4 species of birds that would come down. And even saw-whet owls to some degree, but they continue moving south. They don't stay at least this far north. But yeah, snowy owl, great gray owl, northern hawk owl, and boreal owl. So 4 species at least.
What's the best time of day for people to go out and see birds and get the most variety?
Morning, the earlier the better. I mean, it's for a couple things. One, they're out and about, and then the other thing is that there are less people, when you're out there with them. So you just hear so much more. They're out, they're singing and looking for food, and especially in the spring, they're looking for their mates. So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely morning.
I love that time of morning when before the sun rises, but you start to hear the sound change and the soundscapes just gets louder and you realize that morning is coming. That's I love that.
Yeah.
This is kind of going in a different direction, but thinking on the some of the broader issues around birding and thinking, somebody said, what role should NGOs, nonprofits with wildlife conservation mission play in regard to communities of color and otherwise diverse persons?
That's Monica. with Urban Birding Collective.
Yeah, so I'm part of Audubon St. Paul, and I've been a part of the birding community for 20 years. And it's like any other sort of mainstream sort of organization, it's predominantly white. But it should be more inclusive. There are people of color who are, in every sector of life. And so, while for the Urban Bird Collective, what we did was we were there to create and hold safe space for BIPOC and the LGBT community to be out in nature. But we can't be the only space. Like, we can't be the only organization. And so what we want to see is all NGOs or nature organizations, Audubon chapters, any, to be more inclusive and to think about their policies and practices so that people of color, if they, were to join or were to be a part of any of their programming, that they would feel included, we want them to enjoy, the outdoors just like anybody else. For the Urban Bird Collective, we're just creating it in a different way, and we're holding space for folks who want to be, to make sure that, they're going to be okay, And what we try to do is we try to break down the barriers of the unknown. Maybe they've never gone to a certain park. We show them where the trails are, and how not to get lost, and just taking away that, so that once they've been exposed to it, then maybe they can come back later, bring their family, friends, and that's theirs. Like, they get to then show people around the parks.
That's great.
Yeah. The only thing I would add would just be making sure that at every opportunity to have staff of color who can greet folks of color who do come to visit these spaces, and so they realize they do have some ownership of the spaces that seem mostly white. So yeah, having staff of color is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's it is one of the things that in Minneapolis we need to keep doing, because it's also we've got some great birding spaces in Minneapolis, and I love, part of my job is introducing people to places that they've not seen before, that are, whether it's the riverfront or Eloise Butler Wildflower Garden. And I think it's extending the invitation widely so people feel like it's their space to go as much as anybody else, because that's helpful. Thank you. Somebody said, what is your opinion on calling in birds with recordings from your cell phone? I never thought about that as an issue. Is that something that's commonly done?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Doug.
Go ahead. No, you go.
So what I like to do is practice the calls before I go out, so I know what I'm going to hear. Especially in the spring, and especially for rarer birds, like you shouldn't do that, and try not to use it as much as possible. It just, I don't know how much they're going to be hurt by it, or disoriented. People go back and forth, but I think it's okay to just try to listen and hear and bring them in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, things have changed over the decades. I mean, there was a time when it was very common people would do that, and I know I've done it as a wildlife photographer. I know I've done it, on a number of occasions, and I mean, the things that should be taken into consideration is how much stress and energy the bird is using, how much stress you're causing the bird, and how much energy the bird's using to respond, particularly a male on breeding territory, how much energy he's using to respond to your fake threat. And I mean, I personally wouldn't have a problem doing it maybe once, maybe twice at the most. you know, and then stopping after that. But I mean, I guess it really, if you just want to see the bird, you know, that might be, that might be too much. But yeah, it really comes down to the situation. I mean, because there are parts of the country where it is illegal to play tapes. I know I guide birds or do bird guiding trips in southern Texas every year in the Rio Grande Valley, and we're not allowed to play recordings of birds unless there's a specific person who's been given permission to play, such as a ferruginous pygmy owl. I know is one we play every year, but the tour guide for that particular section of the state, and that it's actually on King Ranch, and he's allowed to play the recording, but no one else is allowed. And they tell us as guides, just do not play tapes. So we don't. But yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, it is, you're sort of creating an inauthentic environment, and I can see birds changing their behavior based on knowing that other birds available.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little things to think about too on this in terms of the ethics of birding. Somebody asked here, they're thinking about going to the Boundary Waters this summer, and what birds can they look for there that they can't find in the Twin Cities?
I have never been to the Boundary Waters. I've been up north. I've been very, very close. So, you know, I've been up to the Gunflint Trail, which is on the outskirts, and then out of Ely, pretty close to there. But for sure, warblers. And have you ever been in the Boundary Waters, Dudley?
Yeah, I've been in a couple of times. I mean, the birds there are going to be different because of the environment's different. It's mostly a coniferous boreal forest type habitat, a mixture of hardwoods and softwoods. But you know, you're certainly going to get warblers. You're going to get, you know, gray jays and a lot of corvids, blue jays, gray jays, ravens, crows. So those are all in the corvid family. Potentially crossbills and pine grosbeaks, and if you're lucky, evening grosbeaks. So it'll be very different because the habitat's different. With all of that coniferous forest, you're going to get different kinds of birds than you would get down in the Twin Cities with all that mostly deciduous forest down there. So different birds, definitely.
Great. Somebody, speaking of birds moving around, somebody said they saw swans, maybe tundra swans, several times last summer, and a friend saw them this winter. Do they normally winter in Minnesota?
They're probably trumpeter swans.
Okay.
And they do winter over here. So actually there's a group on the St. Croix. So if you get down to Hudson, there's swans there. You can see them on a few open lakes around the Twin Cities. But yeah, if anything, so Old Cedar Avenue Bridge, they'll stay around for a little while, you know, while the water's open. But they're probably trumpeter swans.
Okay. Are tree sparrows considered a nuisance species here?
Not that I know of. No,
they're native. They're native. House sparrow, which is actually not a sparrow, that would be it's a weaver finch, and that bird would be a nuisance. But no, chipping sparrows, tree sparrows are not nuisance. They're native to North America.
Great. There's not a rhythm, so they're kind of different topics all over the place.
No
I'm just gonna keep riding through. When planting to attract birds, but dealing with powdery mildew, etc., is it harmful to use organic, environmentally safer products like bonide to treat plants/trees? I
don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, and I don't know the specific answer, but I would think that, you know, if it's organic and if it's labeled as such, it should be safe. But yeah, I mean, I would certainly read the labels and make sure before using it.
Okay. This is going back around the topic of BIPOC and LGBTQ communities. And the person, Susan, wants to know is, do you have suggestions on how to make unstaffed urban parks and natural areas feel more welcoming and also safe for hikers and birders from the BIPOC and LGBTQ communities?
Yeah, I think part of it is, what we're trying to do is go out in numbers. We lead walks as much as possible. For the Urban Bird Collective, we have about 14 folks who we consider like leaders, and they will take people out. And for us, it's not that we're bird experts, but we know our birds, and we're on this continuum, and we're there to learn together. So while we might go out, we're not going to lead you, and we're not going to tell you exactly, you're going to get this or that, or, there's sometimes, but we're not going to be, the all out experts. But we can create that space and that, I don't know, just a great time in nature. For those unstaffed places, even as a woman, I have to think about when I'm going to go out, and where, especially early in the morning. And there have been times where, my gut was just like, nope, I'm not going to do it. And so for me, I now have more friends, especially women friends who are birders and folks from the Urban Bird Collective. I'm going to say, I'm going to go out at this time, and you want to join me? And so we can go out and be in numbers together.
Great. I hear you mentioning trumpeter swans. How do they get lead poisoning?
So Dudley, if you want to answer, I will say some of it is the tackle that's being used, and the so when hunters are using various ammo, there's lead in the ammo.
Yeah, and to that I would add that what happens is they are birds who are bottom feeders, so to speak. They pick up the lead shot in the substrate that's on the bottom of the pond or lake or whatever. So when they're digging around for the tubers for the plants, they eat the sort of the tubers of plants, and when they're digging around in the mud and swallowing plant matter, they're also picking up lead shot that has fallen on the bottom of the body of water they're in, and so they ingest the lead. At least that's what I've read. That's how they get it, is they actually, in the mud, they pick up lead shot.
That's something that we really need to figure out, how to get the lead out of these, out of tackle, fishing tackle, and out of ammo that hunters use.
Yeah, and I think the legislature is looking at it, and they just seem to be slow reacting to it. It seems like it's such a simple fix that. So I don't know for sure, but folks out there, if you do see that there is legislation, or just Google it. Any of us, there's over 60 people here. You could write to your legislators and just say, this is important. So I think those are the little things we can do. Our family cabin in northern Minnesota has recently been seeing pelicans in the lake. Oh, and we saw a pelican on the Mississippi this last fall. Northern Minnesota, is this because of climate change, or what might be the reasons that pelicans are coming?
Yeah, pelicans are native to Minnesota. So you will find pelicans in the Lake of the Woods area and Red Lake, and some of the larger bodies of water in northern Minnesota to have nesting pelican populations. So,
Okay.
you know, they're there because they nest there, or you also have non-breeding pelicans, which you can tell by looking at their beak. I think it's the guys with the big knobs on their beaks are the guys that are the nesters, or the birds that are breeding that year. And so, you know, you'll have non-breeding birds that are just hanging out in large groups on lakes. But I guess the short answer is pelicans are white pelicans specifically, not browns. White
Okay.
pelicans are native to Minnesota, and they nest on those larger lakes in the northwest part of the state, near the Canadian border.
Okay. Yeah, they're really seeing a pelican in the wild they're big birds, and it's
Yeah.
really
They are.
impressive.
I
Yeah.
love watching them fly. You know,
Yeah.
you know that they're up there and they're just circling. They're awesome.
Yeah. So a little bit about a home question about locally here, but what should folks put in their bird feeders at home in the Twin Cities? Any recommendations for people to do here?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this. There's a whole variety of things. So in mine, I have suet, I have Niger, I have safflower, I have, you know, black oil seeds, and I think I said suet. So those are my main things that I have. And then in the spring, I'll throw in some mealworms for special treats. And of course, oranges for the Orioles.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm gonna try to do mealworms this year. I've never done them before. I'm gonna try this year, but I would agree. I'd say if you want to make it super quick and simple, black oil sunflower seed and suet. You can buy them both at the grocery store, dirt cheap. Go to the butcher's section of your grocery store, and a lot of times they'll have beef suet, you know, in already cut up and packaged in those frozen case, you know, in the freezer section. And then the black oil sunflower seed will be in the pet food section. And that's what I would do, you know, just to be quick and simple about it, at least for the winter anyway. Yeah.
That's great. Do you have any favorite lenses or recommendations for camera lens, or even I'm going to add on, you know, binoculars or monoculars that you use for birding that you like?
Sure. I'll let Dudley take this one first, and then I can talk mine.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it really just depends on how serious you are about your photography. I mean, you know, some people spend, you know, more money, but I would say, you know, a 70 to 200 or 100 to 400 would be two lenses I could certainly see recommending. And then there's some other focal lengths. I think Sigma makes a 150 to 600 millimeter lens. That would be really good. You know, for, you know, really good bird photography, if you don't have a way of cloaking yourself or camouflaging yourself, you know, something in the 500 to 600 millimeter range would be ideal, because that way, you know, the bird can be a distance from you, can still get a good picture.
Yeah, I use a Sigma, you know, 150 to 600, and I always have to tell people my pictures seem really close, but I am not. So, you know, it really extends out. So yeah, that's what I always use.
Yeah, I'd say 400 to 600 millimeters would be a good range for the majority of birds to photograph.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask some just questions about your bird experience with the two of you. Can you reflect on a surprising bird experience that either of you had, where you were out and like saw something that you weren't expecting, or that you just thought was something that, or even a behavior that just kind of was surprising or amazing?
Go ahead, Monica.
Well, no, I don't know if it's like that. It's what I've been fortunate is just being out in nature. Like I have a special project that I'm working on to get all 166 climate threatened and endangered birds of Minnesota. And one of them is the black-throated blue warbler. And so the black-throated blue can be found at Tetigooch State Park, not the main Tetigooch, but the Tetigooch off of 2, I think it is. And so I had never seen a black-throated blue, and I went to go get it. And, you have to climb up into the, to the hills, and just that adventure, and I still haven't gotten the greatest picture of it. So every year I just know I'm going to go back and go try to get a really good picture of the black-throated blue. So different things like that. I've just been, really fortunate. I always joke, I take people out to go birding, and I tell them, we're gonna go around this corner and you might be able to see a bittern. And I always think it's never gonna be there. And then one time we were going around the corner and there was a bittern. And so I'm like, oh my God, there's a bittern. And so that was really fun, to be able to show them the bittern.
That's great.
Yeah. For me, bird behavior, because after a while you've seen so many birds, I feel like I'm really interested in bird behavior now more than anything. And I built a tiny house in my backyard a few years ago, and so sitting in there, it's kind of like an observation blind. It's just an 8x10 building with giant glass windows, with stickers on them, of course, to keep birds from crashing into them. But sitting in there and watching birds, particularly warblers in the fall, and the different things that they eat. I was surprised to see some of the things that they eat. Warblers working hosta flowers, and even dandelion flowers to some degree, things that I would consider to be weeds, and then watching how they seem to be of some value to migrants was somewhat surprising to me. So I'd say sitting in my backyard watching migrating birds feeding on things that I don't expect. And one time I had a pine warbler eating thistle, which was also very surprising to me. It's the only pine warbler I've ever seen in my yard, and it was eating my thistle, which is normally food for winter finches, like goldfinch and red poles and siskins and things. So yeah, sitting in my backyard watching bird behavior.
That's great. Is there a bird on either of your list that you are both really wanting to see? Is there a bucket list bird for you?
Yeah, mine's three-toed woodpecker.
I was fortunate to see a three-toed woodpecker up near Ely. And yeah, I almost killed myself, but it was very fun. But I haven't gotten a picture of a golden eagle, a really good golden eagle, in Minnesota. So I've seen him in Wisconsin, and I didn't get a good picture, but I would love to see a golden eagle.
Yeah, and I did not bring binoculars, believe it or not, on this trip up here to Ely today. I forgot my binoculars. I brought all of my camera gear and forgot my binoculars. So I'll be birding by ear the whole time I'm here through Sunday afternoon. So I feel kind of silly, but that I forgot my binoculars. I guess worst case scenario is I go to a shop here and buy some, but I doubt it.
Yeah. I'm not much of a birder, but I did have this, I'll just share a little bit. I experienced once where I was living in Vermont, and on Lake Champlain, the water was just starting to break off. The ice was starting to recede. And there was this moment when the snow geese were coming through, and they were in the water, and there were eagles everywhere on the ice, just kind of, and there was another, I can't remember what there was like 3 convergences of these groups of birds that were kind of passing each other. It was just, I sat there for an hour. We were watching them because they were just interacting. I love those moments.
You had snow geese and eagles, you say?
Yeah. It was, and they were just kind of using this space together. You could tell that there was some energy, like they weren't comfortable with each other.
Oh no, definitely not. Yeah, I've seen eagles, when there's large concentrations of snow geese, and eagles just, they kind of follow them like cheetahs follow, deer and stuff in the Serengeti, and they're always looking for a sickly snow goose to take out. So
yeah, that's what it felt. It felt like that because the numbers of snow geese was just enormous, too many to count.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's where you'll find eagles.
Oh, that's good. All right, we got a few more. We're getting towards the hour already.
Wow.
So somebody, this back on the swans for a quick question. How do you tell if it's a tundra or a trumpeter swan? And then they want to know, if does Minnesota get mute swans?
Yes. So we have gotten mute swans. They're passing through. So I've seen them at Old Cedar Avenue Bridge, and then at Lebanon Hills, I saw mute swans. Dudley, how would you describe the difference between a tundra and a?
Yeah, it's a part of a swan's face called the lores, which is right below the eyeball or behind the eye. There's a yellow spot for tundra swans, and if I'm not mistaken, doesn't trumpeter swan just have an all black beak, no yellow?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. So there's a yellow section in the lores of a tundra swan that is just above the beak, below the eye, and that's how you tell a tundra swan. And a trumpeter swan's beak is all black.
Yep.
And no yellow, no other colors.
That's helpful. Is it true that the health of a lake can be attributed to loon presence or not?
I've heard that is true. The water quality, loons won't nest on lakes that have really bad turbidity, super mucky, muddy. Certainly a lake with an algae bloom wouldn't be good. So I would have to say yes, but Google it.
That's right.
Yeah,
questions we can't answer, we know where folks can go.
Yeah, but I think that's true. I
Yeah.
do believe that's true.
Yeah. Somebody said also there is a white duck in the metro area, Lake Harriet in particular. There's been some debate if they can fly or if that is a domestic or Peking duck released into the wild.
I haven't heard about it yet. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say just about any time you see a white duck, it is a domesticated duck. It might even have its pins clipped, and most likely, potentially even, maybe not even be able to, certainly not to be able to crossbreed with, say, mallards and things like that. I mean, a white duck is a domestic duck pretty much, and is considered one in the United States. It would not be native. It would be something a person would maybe raise on a farm that sells ducks, for Thanksgiving or Easter.
Okay.
So
never really knew that. That's great.
Yeah, they're not native. It would be domesticated duck.
Somebody here is wondering, just in terms of I've got a weak leg and walk with a cane. Can you recommend places for birding here locally where you can be less mobile to get to? Are there any places that you've seen or found?
Yeah, I really look at the places that have really flat, walking trails, and I think of I'm trying to think of the one in Richfield.
The Wood Lake.
Wood Lake, yeah. They
Yeah.
have really flat areas there. Places on Battle Creek, have some of them. I mean, you have to know which trail to go on. I think that's something that we, the Urban Bird Collective, would even like to think about. How do we find, more sort of limited mobility trails,
Right.
and actually it's almost like you're not doing a big walk, but you're spending a lot more time observing what's coming to you, as opposed to you going out and walking and try to find things. I don't know a lot of other areas around here, around the Twin Cities.
That's a good question. I know that the park board does, it's very intentional about mobility and making accessible the parks, making parks accessible to folks. I was starting to think about some of the walkways or some of the decks that they have out on the lakes where, if there's any in the marshy areas where they're very easily to get onto. That's a good question.
Yeah.
All right, we got time for maybe just a couple more here. This one says, I made some of the feeders you showed in the last conversation. I filled them up 2 weeks ago, but still no birds. Any recommendations?
Mhm.
Yeah, it depends on what you put in them, as well as it does take time for birds to find feeders, particularly in places they aren't expecting to find them. So I think Monica mentioned in our last talk that, once you start filling feeders up and feeding birds, be sure to keep them filled, because then birds start to somewhat rely on them. And my thought is, one, just be sure you put black oil seed in it, for instance, or safflower or striped sunflower seed in it, and not those mixed bags of seeds. And then the other is, be patient and let the birds discover the feeder. And then once you start to get them, be sure to keep those feeders full.
Yeah, the other thing to be careful about is location. So making sure that you're putting it, in a place that isn't, accessible to house cats and other predators. That would be another thing that, is maybe they're not being attracted there.
Yeah, they might be actually seeing dangerous situations, such as, vulnerability to cats or windows or something like that, and they're just choosing not to visit for that reason.
Mhm.
Speaking of cats, Emily wanted to know, Monica, what is your cat's name? And does he or she enjoy bird watching as well?
That cat's name is Kitty. It was my mom's cat, and it was actually an outdoor cat, and it was a stray, and I told my mom if she's going to keep it, that, and my mom lived with me for 30 years, and I told her it had to come in. We need it has to be in the house. And so it likes to look at them out, through the window, but it does not go outside.
That's great. And a very important point. Cats need to stay inside.
Yes.
That is the questions we have. Do either of you have any other last, I've got one more question, or last bits of things, but is there a place that you recommend for folks here in the Twin Cities, being the Minneapolis Parks Foundation? We'll include St. Paul in this too. Where should folks go? Where do you recommend people to go to see a mix of good variety of birds?
I always say there's so many great spots here in the Twin Cities. I go to the Minnesota River Valley National Wildlife Refuge, the Old Cedar, Bass Ponds, the Visitor Center. I love the Eloise Butler, Theodore Worth Park, Battle Creek, Como, just the chain of lakes. I love to bike ride around the chain of lakes and watch the duck migration. I kayak, so I hit the rivers. I go to Hidden Falls, I go to Pig's Eye, Crosby. There's so much. We're so lucky here. I'm fortunate. I live along the bluff here on the west side of St. Paul, so I just go to my neighborhood. I go to little pocket parks, or just walk along the bluff and see all the birds.
That's awesome. Dudley, do you have any favorite spots when you're in Minneapolis?
No, I always, Eloise Butler is certainly one of my favorite places, because I'm also a flower person, big time flower person and pollinator person, and I love dragonflies and butterflies, and I feel like going there, I can see everything, indigo buntings and different kinds of flowers, as well as, butterflies, monarchs, and things like that. So that would probably be my favorite, Eloise Butler. Yeah.
It's a gem of a place.
Yeah.
Well, this brings us to the hour. I want to thank the both of you so much for giving us extra time, spending another hour with us. It is really, we will do some work this year to keep trying to engage folks, but just this conversation, I think you helping people think about all the different ways. I was tracking for a while. I think we had over 57 birds. We talked about 57 different birds in this conversation.
Wow.
Yeah. So thank you both so much. Folks can, what's your Instagram, Dudley, that people can follow you on?
At Sony Camera 2016.
At Sony
Yeah.
Camera. And Monica, do you have a social media channel that you?
It's Monica Bryand. I'm really bad with Instagram. I do a lot on Facebook. Folks get a bird of the day.
That sounds good. Well, thank you both so much. And for everybody who joined us, really appreciate you coming out to do this. Please get back to respond to the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, give us feedback, and get out there and bird. In the next 2 months, we're going to see just an eruption of new bird life coming back. And so get out there, tell us your stories.